Lagos to Nairobi, Dakar to Johannesburg. Africa speaks, Africa leads. You're listening to Left Africa.
Imagine a rural clinic in Uganda. They've just been given free access to this state-of-the-art AI diagnostic tool.
Right.
And for an understaffed clinic dealing with a massive backlog of patients, I mean, it feels like a total miracle, right?
Oh, absolutely.
The doctors can diagnose conditions in seconds. But behind the screen, there's this secondary mechanism quietly running.
Yeah.
Every single patient's symptoms, their medical history, local demographic data.
All of it?
Yeah, all of it is being packaged and just shipped back to a server in California. So that clinic isn't just treating patients, it is unknowingly training a billion-dollar commercial model that it does not own.
Right.
And eventually, it might actually have to pay to access it. So welcome to the new scramble for the Global South.
Yeah, the mechanics of that scenario, I mean, they really capture the defining geopolitical shift of our current decade.
It's massive.
It is. We are witnessing the physical and digital infrastructure of the global economy just being rewired in real time. The raw material is being aggressively extracted from one continent, but all the value-added processing is happening somewhere else entirely.
Which brings us to the mission for today's deep dive.
Yeah.
We are trying to figure out if big tech's massive and rapid expansion into Africa for AI data represents a mutually beneficial technological leap.
Right.
Or if it's just a 21st century version of resource extraction.
Yeah, that's the big question.
Right. And to cut through all the PR jargon, we were pulling from a really diverse stack of sources today. We've got academic frameworks from a January 2026 piece in the Frontiers Journal.
Very dense, but good stuff.
Exactly. We also have deep dive technology research from the IFA Institute and NTT data. And we are grounding all of this with prominent reporting from the continent itself.
Which is crucial.
Crucial. So we're looking at the Uganda Observer, Techabol, CIO Africa, LeftAfrica, the East African and African business.
Yeah, because synthesizing those global perspectives with the actual local realities as well, it's the only way to see the full board here. If we just look at the corporate press releases, we totally miss the profound structural changes concerning your personal data and, the future of global AI development.
Everyone agrees data is the new oil. But looking at these sources, the big question they're asking is, well, who owns the refinery?
Right.
And who is just pumping the crude?
That is exactly the dynamic.
Let's start with the economic engine driving all this excitement.
Yeah.
Because, the numbers being thrown around are just staggering. Techabol published a report in February 2026 claiming that Africa's AI opportunity could be worth a massive $136 billion.
Yeah, billion with a B.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And when you see a number like that, the immediate assumption is, okay, widespread economic booming, right?
Naturally.
But when you read the fine print of that report, there's a massive caveat attached to that wealth creation.
The catch is entirely structural. That $136 billion figure is only projected to materialize if, and literally only if, what they call cross-border data flows are enabled.
I want to pause on that phrase, cross-border data flows, because it sounds like this totally neutral bureaucratic technicality.
It really does.
But physically, what does that actually mean?
It means the data generated by, say, a farmer's smartphone in Nairobi or a hospital database in Lagos, it cannot be legally forced to stay on local servers.
Oh, wow.
Right. It must be allowed to travel through undersea cables,
Yeah.
hit a hyperscale server farm in Seattle or San Francisco, and be ingested into those proprietary models.
Well, that's the leaf.
Exactly. The tech giants require that friction-free flow of raw information to train their systems.
So wait, if the rule of the game is that raw data has to leave the continent for the model to work, and the profits and IP leave with it, whose $136 billion tide is this, really?
Yeah, that's the real issue.
Because it sounds less like a rising tide lifting all boats and more like a massive vacuum cleaner just hovering over the continent.
Vacuum cleaner is almost too simple, I think. Yeah, because a vacuum just stores what it sucks up, right?
Yeah.
What we're seeing here is much more like your refinery analogy from earlier.
Oh, right.
The data is extracted for free. It's transformed into a premium, refined product, an artificial intelligence model, and then it's sold back via subscription to the very people who generated the raw material in the first place.
Wow. Sold back to them.
Yeah. And this is exactly why the sources are drawing a rather a chilling historical parallel to the 1884 Berlin Conference.
Right, the Berlin Conference. That was the moment when European powers famously stood around a map, drew arbitrary lines, and divided up Africa's physical resources.
Without a single African representative in the room.
Unbelievable.
And the argument presented in the literature is that a similar, albeit invisible, scramble is happening today.
But with data.
Right. Instead of rubber or gold or arable land, the resource is digital. It's medical records, agricultural yields, consumer behavior, and even cultural expressions.
Which is just wild to think about.
And a Frontiers journal actually coined a formal academic term for this mechanism in their January 2026 paper. They call it algorithmic dependence.
Algorithmic dependence. Break down the mechanics of that for us. Like, how does a country actually fall into that trap?
So it plays out as this self-reinforcing structural loop.
Okay.
The Global South supplies the raw data simply by using digital services. The tech companies in the Global North use that massive volume of data to train and refine their AI models.
Nice. Getting smarter and smarter.
Exactly. And because the Global North companies now own the most advanced, smartest models, the Global South has no choice but to buy back the finished AI products to stay economically competitive.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, they become entirely dependent on algorithms they neither own nor have the capacity to actually audit.
Oh, hold on. I want to challenge this narrative slightly.
Sure.
If the long-term economic benefits are so structurally skewed against the continent, why are these partnerships being signed at breakneck speed?
It's a fair question.
Because, I mean, health ministers and education boards aren't naive. They must be getting something out of this arrangement right now, right?
They're getting vital, immediate solutions to systemic crises.
Okay.
These deals aren't happening in a vacuum. A breakdown by CIO Africa in early 2026 looked closely at OpenAI's health initiatives and Google's AI rollouts across the region.
And what did they find?
Well, impartially speaking, these tools offer immense, tangible value on day one.
So we are talking about, like, rural clinics that simply do not have enough trained specialists suddenly getting an AI that can triage patients.
Exactly.
Or incredibly packed public classrooms utilizing automated grading systems to just give teachers a breather.
Yep. Or AI chatbots offering localized crop advice to farmers dealing with really unpredictable climate shifts.
Right.
When a government has faced decades of underinvestment in physical infrastructure, and a tech giant arrives offering a world-class diagnostic AI for free.
I mean, it saves lives today.
It does.
Yeah.
That immediate utility is an incredibly powerful incentive. It solves the short-term crisis perfectly.
Yet the Uganda Observer published a fascinating open letter in May 2026 that reframes that exact generosity.
Oh, that piece was brilliant.
It really was.
Yeah.
They describe this dynamic not as aid, but as infrastructure capture.
Infrastructure capture.
Right. And I just found that phrase so insightful. It operates a lot like the freemium software models we use on our phones.
Oh, yeah. Good comparison.
But like scaled up to a geopolitical level.
Right.
It's like getting a free trial for a service that you fundamentally build your entire public health or education system on.
Yes.
And then by the time the free trial ends, or the terms of service change, you are so deeply integrated that you can't ever afford to opt out. And you don't even own the work you did while using it.
Exactly. And the lock-in goes much deeper than just financial reliance, too.
How so?
Well, when you outsource your core infrastructure to a foreign algorithm, you encounter another vital concept that the Frontiers Journal introduces. They call it epistemic dependency.
Epistemic. So meaning relating to the nature of knowledge itself. How does that actually manifest technically in an AI system?
It manifests through the training data. If an African doctor or a student relies entirely on an algorithm, we have to look at what that algorithm considers to be the ground truth.
Baseline, basically.
Exactly. Imagine an AI diagnostic tool trained predominantly on American or European hospital records.
Okay.
It learns to weigh symptoms, blood panels, and even analyze skin conditions based on a Western baseline.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah, so when that same AI is deployed in a tropical clinic, its mathematical weights might subtly misdiagnose diseases prevalent in that specific region.
Wow.
Or it might misinterpret symptoms on different skin tones simply because its foundational reality was built somewhere else entirely.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
Or take the classroom example. Yeah. Imagine an AI grading a Nigerian student's essay.
Right.
The student might use perfectly valid, culturally rich West African English idioms.
Sure.
But if the AI's grading rubric was calibrated against historical texts and cultural norms from Silicon Valley or Oxford, it's going to penalize the student.
Absolutely. It subtly rewrites what is considered correct or professional or normal based purely on the data the model was originally fed.
Yeah. So you're not just importing a piece of software.
No, you are importing a foreign worldview disguised as objective math. When you rely on a system built elsewhere, you inherit the biases and the blind spots of its creators. That is the insidious nature of epistemic dependency.
So these companies are vacuuming up local data, but applying Western frameworks to it.
Right.
But the linguistic gold rush reveals an entirely different layer to this. It isn't just about hard infrastructure like hospitals and schools.
No, it's getting very personal.
Yeah, the sources show big tech is getting embedded into the very way people communicate and preserve their culture. Meta, for example, has their No Language Left Behind project. And OpenAI and Google are aggressively pushing to train large language models on African languages.
Yeah, African Business published a really detailed piece on this in June 2026 titled Not Lost in Translation. We are seeing an unprecedented rush to scrape and ingest languages like Yoruba, Swahili, Amharic, Igbo, Twi, and Pidgin into these massive parameter models.
But shouldn't we celebrate that? I mean, I have to push back here because this seems like an undeniable win.
Okay, how so?
Well, for decades, if you didn't speak English or Mandarin or a handful of other major languages, the digital economy was essentially a walled garden.
That is very true.
So shouldn't we celebrate the fact that a farmer in rural Ghana can finally speak to a chatbot in Twi to get weather forecasts? Like, isn't inclusion in the digital age better than being left out entirely?
Let's pause on that assumption for a second, because the inclusion is absolutely vital for accessibility.
Right.
No one is arguing against the utility of a Twi chatbot, but the sources challenge us to look at the mechanism of ownership.
Ownership again.
Always. How did these language models actually get better?
More data, right.
Right. They require millions of daily conversational interactions to refine their weights and balances. Every time that rural farmer or student uses the chatbot, they are providing free conversational data that makes the commercial product smarter and more valuable.
Oh, so they're basically acting as unpaid data labelers.
Exactly. The people providing the cultural nuance, the slang, the context, literally the very lifeblood of the language, they don't own shares in the resulting intellectual property.
Wow.
Furthermore, the IFA Institute's March 2026 report on silicon diplomacy points out this is an active geopolitical race.
Silicon diplomacy.
Yeah. It's not just tech companies. Major global powers, specifically the US, China, and Europe, are competing fiercely for Africa's data compute potential.
Because of the demographics, right?
Yes. They recognize that the continent has the youngest and fastest growing source of fresh human data on the planet. So they arrive offering these grand partnerships.
But the partnerships are essentially access agreements, not equity sharing. Which brings us to a massive regulatory blind spot highlighted in the research. Because African governments are heavily promoting these big tech deals.
Oh, yeah.
You see the ribbon-cutting ceremonies, the glowing press conferences, the declarations of a new era of digital transformation.
Yep.
Simultaneously, the raw data of their citizens is flowing right out of the country via APIs to servers in San Francisco or Beijing.
It is a really striking contradiction. And NTT Data released research in May 2026 demonstrating that public privacy and sovereignty concerns are accelerating fast.
I bet.
But the regulatory bodies just cannot keep pace with the technology. Citizens are beginning to ask fundamental questions about where their biometric or conversational data is being stored.
And the laws just aren't there.
The legal frameworks are simply not baked yet.
Well, the East African ran an article addressing this sovereignty push exactly.
Yeah.
They pointed out the frameworks do exist on paper, right?
Technically, yes.
You have the African Union's data policy framework and the Malabo Convention on Cybersecurity.
Yep.
But, those are just documents.
Exactly. Having a framework on paper and possessing the technological leverage to enforce it against a $2 trillion monopoly are entirely different realities.
Obviously.
The reporting notes that enforcement remains really weak. It's frequently neutralized by aggressive big tech lobbying that essentially promises continued free access to these vital tools, but only if regulations remain loose.
Ah, right. If the current trajectory leads straight into algorithmic dependence, what are the actual mechanical alternatives?
That's the million-dollar question.
Because we don't want to just outline the problem without looking at the engineering solutions being proposed. And the experts quoted in LeftAfrica's June 2026 report They lay out a very concrete physical alternative,
Which is?
building localized data centers.
Right, localized infrastructure.
Right.
Because currently the global AI industry relies on hyperscale cloud regions, these massive centralized server farms usually owned by Amazon, Google, or Microsoft.
Right.
The alternative push is to mandate localized physical infrastructure, meaning the data must be housed on servers physically located within the continent.
But why does the physical location of a server matter so much in a cloud-based world? Like, it's all in the cloud anyway, right?
Because physical location dictates legal jurisdiction.
Oh.
It goes far beyond just creating local tech jobs, which is great, but it's really about intellectual property governance.
So.
If a data set physically resides within a country's borders, it is subject to that sovereign government's laws. It grants the government the leverage to say, if you want to train your large language model on our citizens' medical records or our indigenous languages, the resulting AI model must be partially owned by or freely licensed back to our public sector.
That makes a ton of sense. But the tech giants are fully aware of that threat to their business model, right?
Oh, completely.
And they have a very effective countermove. They approach universities and governments and just offer unlimited cloud storage and hyperscale compute power essentially for free.
Yeah.
And it sounds like a massive philanthropic gift. But thinking about the mechanics of lock-in, I mean, it's kind of like a massive moving company offering to pack and store all your household items for free.
Right.
And you think it's amazing, but buried in the terms and conditions is a clause that says they now own your furniture.
That captures the structural trap perfectly. And the Frontiers Journal explicitly refers to this tactic as infrastructural colonialism.
Infrastructural colonialism.
Yes. The dependency is created through overwhelming generosity. By offering massive free cloud resources, big tech makes the idea of building sovereign, localized data centers seem like a ridiculous, overly expensive waste of local tax dollars.
Because why build it if it's already free?
Exactly. They effectively stifle any local physical competition before the concrete can even be poured.
Yet despite that pressure, some nations are actively designing alternative architectures to avoid this exact fate.
Right.
The sources cite India as a primary example. India developed the Data Empowerment and Protection Architecture, or DPAC.
The mechanics of India's DPAC are fascinating, actually, because they fundamentally decouple data storage from data processing.
Which means what, practically?
Well, in the Western model, the company that stores your data usually gets to analyze it too.
Right.
India's architecture introduces a digital consent broker. It physically forces companies to ask for granular, temporary consent to use a citizen's data for a specific purpose.
Oh, wow.
And the citizen can revoke that access at any time.
So it transforms the user from a passive resource to an active gatekeeper.
Exactly.
The sources also mention Brazil, which is taking a different route by mandating public AI models.
Right.
Ensuring that any model trained on public citizen data must remain a public good, rather than a proprietary corporate
A
asset.
completely different approach, but very interesting.
Very. And looking internally at the continent, Rwanda is frequently highlighted for their aggressive state investments in local compute infrastructure.
They are.
They are trying to build the literal server racks required to keep their data home.
And these models prove that the extraction of data isn't just an unavoidable law of physics.
Right.
But choosing sovereignty requires immense political will. I mean, a government has to look at a free, immediate technological rollout that could honestly help their citizens today and say no.
Which is so hard.
It is. They have to turn it down in favor of the much harder, slower, and more expensive path of building the infrastructure themselves.
Okay, pulling all of these threads together, there is one core message that really cuts through the noise of the PR announcements.
What's that?
It is the warning from the Uganda Observer open letter.
Yeah.
They categorize this exact window of time as the continent's last honest chance to lead.
It is a very sobering assessment of the timeline.
Yeah.
The window for structural action is closing incredibly fast. Once the medical databases are scraped, once the public education systems are thoroughly locked into foreign APIs,
Right.
and once the rich nuances of local languages are permanently absorbed into proprietary parameter weights, renegotiating the terms of service becomes virtually impossible.
Because the data's already gone.
Right. You cannot untrain an artificial intelligence model once it has mathematically digested your knowledge.
And this hidden architecture, it matters to you, the listener, regardless of where you are tuning in from today.
Absolutely.
Whether you live in the global south or you're sitting in an apartment in London or New York, this deep dive exposes the invisible costs of the quote-unquote free AI platforms we all interact with every single day.
It does.
It maps out exactly how global power and wealth and intellectual property are being quietly redistributed through the extraction of data.
Because we have this tendency to think of artificial intelligence as this ethereal, magical software just kind of floating up in the cloud.
Yeah, totally.
But the reality is that AI requires vast, continuous inputs of human labor, human knowledge, and massive physical infrastructure. Understanding the mechanisms of who controls those inputs is honestly the only way to understand who will control the future economy.
Which brings me to a final provocative thought for you to explore on your own. We know from industry reports that AI companies are rapidly burning through the readily available data on the internet.
Right, the data wall.
Yes. They are quite literally running out of fresh, high-quality, human-generated text to train on in the West. So as these massive models increasingly have to rely on synthetic AI-generated data.
Which engineers warn can degrade the model's quality, by the way.
Exactly. It leads to collapse over time.
Yeah.
So will the diverse languages, the deep cultural nuances, and the unique local knowledge currently being extracted from the global South eventually become the most highly prized premium commodities in the digital world?
That is a fascinating question, because in a fast-approaching future where the internet is just an ocean of synthetic AI-generated noise,
Right.
authentic human data will easily be the most valuable resource on the planet.
Exactly. And if that scarcity becomes reality, the ultimate question remains: who will actually reap the financial rewards of that authenticity? Because everyone agrees data is the new oil. But as we've explored today, if you don't own the refinery, you're just giving away the fuel that runs someone else's world.